Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
My name's Herb. I'm an alcoholic. Hi, welcome to the 31st Roundup. I happen to be 31 years sober also. So they started it the year I got sober, although I had no idea what a roundup was, so I didn't go, of course. February 21st, 1984. My sponsor, current sponsor, I've only had two, is Ed. I had my first sponsor for 28 years, but he moved out of town, and I'm a big believer in visual sponsorship. And my home group, I have actually two. A Wednesday night men's stag up at Mary and Joseph Retreat Center. That was my very first meeting, and I've been going there for 31 years. And the Walteria Men's Stag Step Crosstalk meeting. I always get that reaction. Very different, very countercultural. And 26 years ago, I was mandated there by the man who I had asked to go through the steps with. And I'm so glad that I did go through the steps with him and also become a regular participant at that meeting. It and the steps changed me. So, let's pray the Serenity Prayer. You have a prayer sheet. If you don't have a prayer sheet, those are also up on the little circular table in the middle of the room. And you may already know the Serenity Prayer. I never assume. Please join me. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So this is an image from the Sistine Chapel, where Michelangelo attempted to depict creation. The hand of God reaching down to create humans. All right? And notice they're not touching. It's kind of interesting. It's a little faded. Maybe you can't see it. But I thought that would be a good beginning for the question. Is God necessary? That question began percolating in me over a year ago when I was asked to be a speaker at the annual ACA conference. And they asked, normally they don't give you a topic. They ask you what you would like to talk about. They gave me a topic. And the topic, ACA conference, Adult Children of Alcoholics. And the topic was, where was God when all this was happening? And so I liked the title. I took the assignment and I prepared for it. But since then, it's been percolating with me. Questions about this. I also do some work in an adolescent treatment center. And I try to communicate with vocabulary that isn't filled with God, 12 steps, and spirituality because they resist that. And I know that if they stop resisting and hear the truth of what my experience is, that they too can get on the path and have an experience. So this is not so much a workshop. I started out preparing a workshop, a presentation, and it came to me about 2 weeks ago that it was going to be more a meditation. This is an extended meditation. I started out preparing this 3 months ago with an answer to the question. And 2 weeks ago in my meditation, the little wee small voice said, "Are you kidding? You can't answer that question, and it's not appropriate." What's the spirit of the 12 steps? What's the spirit of any 12-step program as certainly represented out of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous? To ask questions. Not necessarily to give answers. To suggest some actions, but not information. And so I will be going through this meditation, reflecting, asking you to reflect, and raising some questions. The question is so much more important than the answer. One of my teachers is Richard Rohr, R-O-H-R. He's a Franciscan priest, probably been an ordained priest for 45 or 50 years, a prolific writer, probably a mystic, certainly a prophet. And he said the question's so much more important than the answer, because if you give an answer, pay attention, sponsors. If you give an answer before they have the question, it's just like water off a duck. They can't get it, they can't hear it, they can't absorb it. So I'm asking you to ask yourself a question. I will propose some questions. I will propose some reflections. And my experience with that is in the hospital that my wife was being treated for her alcoholism, an act of total courage, walking out of the house, leaving me with 3 kids, and she knew who I was, and she knew that I was alcoholic. I didn't. But they asked me a question. What is your relationship with alcohol? And I got some information from them concerning the genetic disease, 80% probable, concerning the family system, that alcoholism is a family disease, and lots of other things. And they asked me to write out taking action my answer to the question about my autobiography of my relationship with alcohol. And then they asked me to read it to a group in that hospital program. Writing it, I got connected to my history in a way that I had never connected, but reading it out loud, I got connected to an experience that I had never had. And I saw the truth that I had a drinking problem. I didn't rush to conclusion. Mary is the alcoholic, not Herb. I just have a little problem. And that began my journey. But it was the question asked at the right time and not answered. They knew the truth, but they knew I didn't know. But that if I asked the question and did due diligence with the question and came to an answer on my own experience, that it could be transformative. And so Richard Rohr says, ask yourself the question and hold the question, because an asked and unanswered question held in the milieu of prayer, we started with the serenity prayer, will take you to a place that you don't even know exists. Now, it sounds a little new agey, but it's absolutely my experience. Every time I've been given instructions on some type of spiritual work especially, and prayer orientation, not the words, but the spirit, the orientation, I'm taken to a place that I did not know existed. It's really startling sometimes. It's certainly surprising sometimes, but now I've learned to expect it. It's kind of my delight. So ask yourself this question. This is the first of your assignments. This is a reflection, but not ready, fire, aim. That hardly ever works well. unless you have a shotgun, I guess. But if, in fact, you really want to hit the target, it's ready, aim, fire. Hear the question. Hold the question. 30 seconds, 15 seconds, but pause. Make sure you understand the question. And then write out an answer. It's the getting it out of the head or the heart onto paper that can be quite transformative. It shapes it for you. And those of you who journal know the truth of that. Those of you who have done a fourth step in writing know the truth of that. That once you put it in writing, it begins to take a shape that you didn't intend. And you can be surprised. And sometimes that's not good news. So here's the question, but you have to hear the question. At first you'll think you heard the question, but then I'm going to explain the question. Those of you who have had some exposure to me know what to expect on this one. Because we're talking about the topic here, is God necessary? All right, that's not the question. The question is, what is your belief about God? Now, I didn't ask you what you know or think or feel or want, what you've read or been told by sponsors, AA, the Bible, your religious tradition, your parents. I didn't ask any of that. I asked you to ask yourself what you believe, really, truly. Hold it. Think about it. Take a look at your heart. Listen to the wee small voice. And write an answer. A word, a phrase, a sentence. Nothing long. And this is for you. This is very safe. I will never call on you. I doubt whether we'll have much time for discussion. So this work is for you. Be radically honest. The big book suggests rigorous. I turned the burner up on that. Radical. Coming from the Latin radix, at the root. Be fiercely honest with yourself. What is it that you really believe? There's no right or wrong answer. It's just your answer. And write it out, please. If you're still writing, continue to write, and I'll continue to talk. It's about what you believe, not what you want or know. So one of my favorite quotes is Einstein. And he said, the consciousness that created the problem cannot be the consciousness that solves the problem. It's brilliant. Bill had that awareness when he crafted the 12 steps. The 12th step says, having had a spiritual awakening. No, really, I'm quoting. Having had a spiritual awakening. Oh, so we've been spiritually asleep. We need a shift in consciousness. We need a methodology that will wake us from our slumber and give us an awareness of who we are, how we feel, what our purpose is, and what our behavior is. That's what the 12 steps methodology does for us. It takes us to a place of consciousness. I knew none of this when I came in the program in 1984. And for 4 years, I went to a meeting every day and called my sponsor every day. And at the conclusion of 4 years, I still didn't know this. I was restless, irritable, and discontent. And I heard a man share about being taken through the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, one step at a time, one page at a time, in a very structured process, and that it was a precise textbook giving a sure path to transformation, a spiritual awakening, a change in the way we think and feel and behave. Appendix 2. A change in the way we think and feel and behave, and it's done to us, not by us. Oh, the 12 steps are a lot of work. Anybody who has done any steps know that at the very least it's a lot of work of reading and writing. And those of you who have gone deeper, because you are ready to do that and you have that kind of mentorship, know that it's a heavy-duty reflection too, and you can go deep inside and see the truth. But those of you who have finished your 9th step and are living in 10, 11, and 12, it says we entered the world of the Spirit. We commenced this way of living as we cleaned up the past. Know that 10, 11, and 12 allow us to stay awake. We get awake, 1 through 9, but we have a tendency to fall asleep. And we also know that if, in fact, we're looking back over our shoulder at the path that we walked, that we have been changed by the work that we did in the step process. But here's the key. The results are way bigger than my contribution to it. A change in the way we think and feel and behave, and it's done to me, not by me. That's why I really like that opening picture. The hand of the Spirit and the hand of human reaching out for one another and touching. For me, it's a symbol of willingness and grace. Whatever grace means, that's the whole purpose of today's 2-hour discussion, presentation, reflection, meditation. What does that mean? The hand of the Spirit, G-O-D, higher power. What does that mean, and is it necessary to have that kind of vocabulary and that kind of reality and belief about it? And so the man said to me, Herb, you have a lot of information. I mean, I was a monk for 7 years. I know some shit. My wife will correct me on that one. But for 7 years of silence, I studied and I meditated and I had teachers and mentors and spiritual directors, and I came out and I shed my spirituality that I thought I had, like the black robe that I hung up when I left. And for 20 years I never touched a meditation book again, because I didn't know how to do it and I didn't know the value of it. And I got real busy with living life. He said, you have a lot of information, Herb, but you have no transformation. He did that in a coffee shop. I got it. He said, your information has never touched your experience, never touched your heart, and you have not been changed. And I was restless, irritable, and discontent. 4 years in AA, going to a meeting every day, calling my sponsor every day, thinking I was doing the drill. And so he suggested that I be willing to have the Spirit enter my life, whatever that meant, and open my mind and open my heart so that the Spirit could write what it is I needed to know and what I needed to do. Sounded a little new agey, but I'd never heard this kind of talk before, but I was willing to do that. I was willing to have an open mind and an open heart and to release the information and the experience that I had up till this point. Because he said that knowledge that I had and that information that I had and that experience that I'd had and my beliefs that I had were the very impediment to going any further until I released them, not throw them away, but just to release them. On the prayer page that you have, and if you don't have it, there's some on the middle table there. There's the set-aside prayer at the top. By the way, you're welcome to take these sheets with you when you go. They might be a handy reference for you. for establishing a morning practice if you don't have one, or for supporting your morning practice if you do have one. So breathe in and breathe out and be willing. This is it. The words are not important. The spirit and the intentions are. And join me in the set-aside prayer. God, please set aside everything that I think I know about myself, my brokenness, my spiritual path in you, for an open mind and a new experience with myself, my brokenness, my spiritual path, and especially you. So I like to provide a context for what we're doing here so that you kind of have a sense of how it is going to go, what is the roadmap, what are we going to be talking about. And first of all, we need to know who we are as a human being. So I'll put up some thoughts about that. I'm asking questions of myself. I'm asking you to ask questions of yourself. My thoughts will come from my reading and from my education and from my background and from my beliefs and from my experiences. It's not necessarily true for you. You have to come with your own reflections and with your own thoughts and your own knowledge and experience. But perhaps this will either support or challenge what you know, what you think you know, what you believe, what you think you believe. The same with, so who or what is God as a divine being in contrast to a human being? That's the assumptions here. Is God necessary? We really need to know who we are and what God is in terms of the God symbol. We'll talk more about that. Is God necessary? We'll ask some questions, some reflection. And then after you do that, what do I do? What's the action plan? That's today's journey. And so let's take a look at a reality. This is my perspective of who we are. Who am I as a human being? Not as Herb, not as a resident of Southern California. No. In my essence as a human being, which would allow me to be the same as any other male or female. The essence, not the accidents. What is it that truly makes me human? Well, I'm certainly a finite material being. Material, I was born and I know I'll die. I'm finite, that's what that means. I had a beginning and I'll have an end. Material, meaning I have a biology that grows until it starts to deteriorate. Those of you who are over 60 or 70 know what I mean about additional doctor's appointments, right? My body allows me as a material to exist, but it doesn't differ anything from a rock. A rock exists. It is material. A flower grows. It's material, but it has an interesting dynamic of vegetation. A cat has more than a flower. It can move around, and other kinds of things that animals have a capacity to do that vegetables don't. And then we come to the human being. What makes us specifically human? That we have a mind that knows. We're the only sentient being that can stand outside themselves and look at themselves. We can transcend ourselves and examine our information and our consciousness. Self-reflection. One of the two distinguishing characteristics that makes us human. And the third is that we have free will. Now, to a large extent, our will is not free in the area of vegetation and in the area of emotions. They're driven just as much as the carrot and the cat. Because if we're material and we're animal. But there is something about our cortex, something about that final development of the human brain that allows us to make a free choice. Look at you here. Lots of people saw the roundup was going on and didn't come. Lots of people who came to the roundup saw about this event and they didn't come. You came to the roundup. You saw this event. And you've come here. You, with a free choice, have chosen how to spend this couple hours. Freedom, free choice. This is the key to spirituality. Willpower. It's also the key to corruptibility, spiritual malady. So I'm a finite created spirit. That mind and that will are functions of my spirit. They're not organs. You could not have a mindectomy. Because the mind doesn't exist any one place. I have a brain, but that's not my mind. Because I have the ability to know from my heart. I have an ability to know from my gut. I have an ability to know from my five senses. Mind is the symbol of all those functionalities. And so I create a model of the human being, that we have a body, that we have a mind, and that we have a will. And it's no accident that I use the triangle, because I do believe that the program, the 12-step program, although I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that has been the substructure of my understanding of spirituality that fosters my spirituality and my emotional growth, it's broader than that, all right? And so I see that Bill Wilson may have used in his own mind the triangle that represents the steps, the first legacy, the bottom line, a process of transforming our mind, spiritual awakening, and the traditions, guidelines for behavior within the fellowship and among the fellowship. And then the 12 concepts, how to operate a non-profit, altruistic organization based on spiritual principles. This model is critical to my understanding of each of the steps, especially the first step, but all of the steps together. And this is the environment or the substructure that allows me to ask the question, is God necessary? Is God necessary? Or can it just be the application of the steps? And given 1939, when Bill was writing in a Christian environment coming out of the Oxford group, he used some words that we might not use today. He had the good sense to say God as you understand God, because that was his experience. When Ebby Thatcher said, I got religion, Bill said, certainly not that, you're smarter than that, and recoiled from it. Ebby had the information and experience from the Oxford group to say, Bill, choose your own concept. Choose your own concept. It's an amazing response coming from what I consider to be a fundamentalist evangelical group, the Oxford group, that they would in fact endorse that. But I've heard him in a conversation talk about that. The big book supports that dynamic. On page 64, by the way, and it probably crystallized my thinking about it. Although it's in the paragraph talking about resentments, it gives an overview. From it stem all forms of spiritual disease, for we have been not only mentally and physically ill, we have been spiritually sick. You see the three parts of the human. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. The three parts that need rehabilitation: body, mind, and will. And so recently I've adopted and adapted the Maslow hierarchy of values to this. And I have copies of some of the stuff back there after the time together that might be useful to you. Be sure to take a look at that material, and I'll point it out as I go through what might be there and what might not be. But it's really interesting. It corresponds to understanding the human being. What is a human being? Of course, it's biology, like we just talked about. And I always like to throw this out because it's a really challenging, confrontational piece of question. Biology. Are you getting enough sleep? When I ask men that, who I work with, they say, oh yeah, absolutely. I can get by on 4 or 5. So I changed the question because the testosterone in them won't allow them to see the truth. How much sleep do you get? When do you go to bed? When do you wake up? And most of them are only getting 5 or 6 hours sleep. And if you're not getting 7.5 to 9 hours sleep, it depends on you. 7.5 to 9 hours sleep a night, you're sleep deprived. And if you're sleep deprived, you'll be overcompensating. It's very difficult to become spiritual if you're sleep deprived. It's very difficult to be spiritual if you're hungry or thirsty. I mean, truly, in the sense of starving and dying. All right, so Maslow got it right as the foundation to the human being. Of course, then there's the emotional development, the social development, the psychological development. Notice it's all building up to what he calls self-actualization. Now, he doesn't use the term God in terms of divine. He's a psychologist, he's a scientist, but he uses the word spiritual. Because what he means by spiritual is that self-actualization, the becoming the maximum human being that you can be, determining, what does he use there? Value and meaning. I like purpose and context also. Value and meaning, purpose and context. So that we know who we are and what we are, so that we can in fact have some congruence in the way we live our life. How you define a human being will in fact then determine how you behave. That's why these questions are so important. I've mentioned the brain. I've become interested in this. Dan Siegel, a psychiatrist in UCLA, has done pioneering work in brain research. He's a psychiatrist, and he's been doing developmental work on the brain, and it has changed science and knowledge about the brain in the last 15 years. We didn't know the brain could grow. We didn't know the brain could transfer from one dead area to another dead area, and we didn't know that it, in fact, is plasticity. That's his term. It can change. And it's interesting what he says. It doesn't matter what you know, and it doesn't matter what you feel. It does matter what you do. And he has research to prove it. Knowledge will not change your brain. Feelings will not change your brain. The actions that you take will change your brain. It will grow new neuronal synapses, those little things that connect to each other in the brain. It will grow new ones and grow new neuronal channels to create new habits. Now, we knew that in common sense, and we know that certainly in 12-step spirituality. Don't you hear it in the meetings? It doesn't matter what you know. It doesn't matter what you feel. Take the directions from your experienced sponsor and do it anyway. We've known that for 80 years, and the real authentic spiritual traditions have known it for thousands of years. But now we've codified it in institutional, statistical, valid research. And so we have a carrot brain. right? That's the first of the brainstem. It's right here. It's the area in us that allows a lizard, first of all, to know whether to eat it or mate with it. Got to have to lighten it up a little bit, right? The motto of 12-step is easy does it. Sorry, it's not one I adopted. Heavy does it is my motto, all right? But I try to bring in a little lightness because I know that it helps. All right. And of course, then we have the middle brain, that limbic system that gives us the animal ability for survival in terms of feelings. Feelings are great. They are absolutely necessary for survival. Those feelings that we look at in the fourth step, anger and fear and dishonesty and shame and guilt that allows us to hold secrets and camouflage ourselves, that's just a cover for who we are biologically in survival instincts. Fight, flight, and freeze. Now, I don't know whether Bill knew that model when he was developing the material in the big book, but he certainly did when he developed the material in the 12 and 12. A little different model, a little deeper, more sophisticated model. He talks about instincts gone awry. He got it. He nailed it. But here's the real human being is the ability to know and decide, as I mentioned, the cortex and the neocortex. We're talking about millions of years of evolution to get to this place, and now we have the male brain with some distorted emphasis. Millions of years of conditioning. Yeah, notice, avoid personal questions, lame excuses, attention span. Look at the listening gland here. But you're not exempt, all right? So women also have some need for commitment and some telephone skills and some shoe and handbag coordination. But guys, look at the sex gland connected to the listening gland. You might want to think about your small listening capability. Once again. All right. So what's the problem? So what's the problem with human beings? Certainly everybody in this room has some addiction. See, I'm much broader than AA in terms of my experience and presentation. My book back there, my second book, is Spiritual Awakening, Enlightenment for Everyone. And Bill had that insight. In the first printing of the big book, on the first page, the preface, in the first paragraph, last line, he says, our way of living may have its advantages for all. Bill knew the 12-step methodology was a human methodology geared specifically for transformation, geared specifically for spiritual awakening. And that's why it was so easily adopted by the Al-Anons, and then by the over 100 12-step programs that are in existence today, especially in Southern California. All right, and you can see some of them. The internet, especially internet pornography, is a tsunami that is sweeping the country, and maybe the world. And the game compulsion and addiction now is of major concern to those who are concerned about those things in raising children and adolescents especially. There are now dedicated treatment centers for game addiction. Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, it's sad, but it's who we are as human beings. We like to feel good, and we like to not feel at all. And those are the two sides, of course, of an addiction problem. The big book suggests that we're powerless over it. All right? Well, it's certainly a huge difficulty when you're an alcoholic, and that's the experience that I have. When I began to drink, I lost control. Not every time, But it got worse over time. Dr. Silkworth calls that an allergy, an abnormal reaction to a substance. A drink does not slake my thirst. It creates my thirst. I'll have a drink intending to have a drink, and I'll have 20. And I didn't intend to. And when I stop, I cannot stay stopped. The big book introduced me to the dynamic and reality of obsession, compulsion, delusion. My mind does not know that it does not know. And it can't see that it does not see. I don't know how that works, but I know that's my experience and the experience of any addict. So there's two questions, sponsors, of you can help people, because these are the questions that help me identify why I'm an alcoholic. I'm not an alcoholic because of the drama in my life. I'm an alcoholic because of my relationship to alcohol. When I drink, I lose control. The question is, did you ever lose control? Did you lose it more than once? If the answer is yes, then they're probably an addict, no matter what the question is concerning, substance or process. Substance being alcohol, drugs, and food, process being everything else that was up on the board. Usually having its origin in the brain dysfunction of some kind. But the second question is, once you stop for good reason, and you have a period of stopping, a week, a weekend, a month, a year, several years, a decade, I was a good stopper. I stopped regularly. I just couldn't stay stopped. And I started again with very little consciousness of starting again. And that's that obsession and delusion that hijacks our mind. Broken. I call that brokenness. You heard it in the set-aside prayer. Brokenness, because it's an umbrella term that covers the human race. Not just in the addiction, but in the unmanageability. Notice the percentages. There's only a percentage of people that are alcoholic, and there's only a percentage of people that are in other addictions, but especially who are connected to the alcoholic, the codependent, the ACA, or the Al-Anon. It's not everybody. But Bill has a description of unmanageability, experientially, behaviorally, on page 52, those bedevilments, that describes how I behave when I'm in my spiritual malady. 4 years sober, not having even thought of a drink for 4 years, certainly not even being tempted to have a drink in 4 years, and yet I'm restless, irritable, and discontent. I think the lack of knowledge or acceptance of the knowledge of unmanageability is one of the key reasons for relapse. The behavior is described in the bedevilments, but the exact nature is described 10 pages later on page 62. Selfishness, self-centeredness is the root of the problem. See, we're still in the mode here of talking about what is it that makes us human, and as a human being, what is it that creates a problem for us? Addiction certainly is a problem, but just being human is a problem. Because in fact, these are unmanageable. I am having trouble with personal relationships. This is from the big book, page 52. I changed it to personal pronoun, present tense. I am having trouble with personal relationships. This is a rhetorical question. No hands, please. Are you having a problem with a significant other, with a father, parent, child, children, sibling, relative, neighbor, sponsor, sponsees, bosses, subordinates, co-workers at work? Are you having trouble with personal relationships? I did this work at 10 years of sobriety. And I didn't know that I didn't know, and I couldn't see that I didn't see that my restless, irritable, and discontent was coming from some other area. And it wasn't outside of me. It was inside of me. I thought if I knew better, I'd do better. The problem is I didn't know better. And the other problem is, even when I knew better, I didn't do better. Now, St. Paul said it in the Christian scripture. I do what I don't want to do, and I don't do what I want to do. That's the bedevilment. That's unmanageability. I can't control my emotional nature. I am a prey to misery and depression. I can't make a living. Now, I was wonderfully employed in a career that I really loved, and they paid me a decent amount of money. So I took it into meditation, as I do all my questions. And I said, well, how does that apply to me? And the wee small voice answers, this is meditation. Look it up in the dictionary. Meditation is directed thinking. It is not no thinking. It is not emptiness and silence. Meditation is, in fact, an active process of thinking, reflecting, discerning, and watching your thinking. All right? Amazing breakthrough for me. I mean, 7 years a monk, I didn't know that. 4 years in Alcoholics Anonymous, going to a meeting every day, calling a sponsor every day, and I did not know that until I went through these steps with a man who knew that. Bill says in the meditation section in the big book, pages 85 to 88, upon awakening, we ask God to direct our thinking. That's the definition of meditation. And it goes like this: God, please direct my thinking. Then it says, Bill does, think about the 24 hours ahead. Consider your plans for the day. Fabulous. Broke the code for me. I haven't stopped meditating since, every day. Now, I've expanded that. If you're interested, I have a flyer that will be a 4-hour discussion about intentional consciousness. Meditation, contemplation, mindfulness, centering prayer. Under the umbrella of intentional consciousness up at the retreat center in the end of October. I can't be wait a minute. I can't make a living. I need to finish that. I get sidetracked. That satisfies me. Because the wee small voice said, Herb, you're a bottomless pit. There's not enough money, prestige, recognition, pleasure, is there? Thank you for sharing. I have a feeling of uselessness. I am full of fear. I am unhappy. I can't seem to be of real help to other people, nor do I really want to be. I took it into meditation, and the voice got a little louder and says, Herb, you don't really want to help people. You want the reputation of helping people. All right? It's calling me out. That narcissist in me, all right, that just loves the adulation and the recognition. And so let's reflect for just a minute. Hear the question, hold the question, and then write out an answer. Where is my life not working? How effective are my efforts? Do I really want my life to change? And what changes would I like? Just react to the entire series of questions. And you may want to do some work later on, but for this purposes now, you have 30 seconds to reflect. Yeah. And it's in connection to these bedevilments. Where are you restless, irritable, and discontent? Where are you suffering? Where are you suffering? Most of us don't come to spirituality because it was a good idea. Most of us come because of pain. Please write. Okay, we're going to continue. You continue writing. Now, this is a perspective on the other side of it. We've asked the question, who am I as a human being? Well, what is this thing called God? Who is God? G-O-D. All right, most of us know that it's a symbol that the word G-O-D is not the reality, that the word G-O-D is merely the symbol. Others call it Allah, Jesus, Trinity, Yahweh. Different religious traditions have different vocabulary based on their history, their culture. But by definition, it has to be an infinite, immaterial reality. If it is, I'm not assuming at this point, or maybe through the entire presentation, that there's any reality to God. I'm raising the questions, not bringing an answer, like the big book does. But if it exists, it has to be infinite, meaning no beginning and no end. Because if it had a beginning, what started it would be God. Beyond our ability to comprehend. I remember Sister Alicia in the second grade, and she said to the little second graders, imagine that you went to the beach with a bucket and you had such a wonderful time that you wanted to take the ocean home. But your bucket's only this big, and the ocean is this big. I mean, it made such an impression on me, that visual image. I got it. It's beyond my ability to comprehend. Bill says it in the big book. Because Groucho Marx said, any club that would accept me as a member, I wouldn't want to be a member of. That dates me a bit. But anyway, for us, any God that I can understand isn't a big enough God. Because I've created that. Even the concept. So, if it had no beginning and has no end and is real, it's fully present at all times. It's never absent. By definition. This is just logic. It's all-knowing because it's all present. It always has been, always will be. And it's unconditional love. And the reason I say it that way is we hear unconditional applied to human beings a lot. And it's nice poetry. It's just not reality. Because human beings are material. And to the extent that we're material, we have needs. So we can't be unconditional. The only reality that can be unconditional is that which has no needs. That is infinite. And I use the word love, which is a very hackneyed word, given to so many different, I love Starbucks, and I love ice cream, and I love my wife, and I love my children, and I love most of my sponsees. And just got to have a little humor, or attempt at it anyway. And so that's using the word in so many different ways. But Greg Boyle is a Jesuit priest who founded Homeboy Industries. And he has a book called Tattoos on the Heart. This is industry-giving work to the gang members so that they can get out of the gang and establish themselves as part of society. And he says in this book, perhaps, just perhaps, God created humans because God thought they would enjoy it. That's really cool. Perhaps God created humans because God thought they would enjoy it. Why else would he create this pesky group of animals? Right? Exactly. Not for God's sake, but for their sake. And that's going to be kind of a theme through here. An uncreated, creative reality. Now, Bill Wilson took us to a place in step 2 in the Big Book, chapter 4, in which he uses the circle, the original logo of Alcoholics Anonymous. A circle is a symbol of having no beginning and no end. And he asks us to make a decision about it. Page 53. Now he asks us to have a question. God is or God isn't. God is everything or God is nothing. What's your choice? See, he asks us to reflect and come up with a reflection and an answer for ourselves. He doesn't give us an answer, because we don't have any theology, we don't have any dogma in the world of 12-step. We have a whole lot of suggestions about what we can do, not what we can think and not what we can feel. That's the magic silver bullet of the 12-step program. It's totally adaptable to the individual and totally compatible with any stance, any religious tradition, including no religious tradition and even atheism and agnosticism. He asks us to choose our concept. Our concept. That's an act of faith, using our will to make a decision. Bill talks about that being, the willingness being the cornerstone. Willingness, the first stone put on the foundation of powerlessness that sets the direction. Willingness. Then he has a model. I have developed a model based on my experience with the 12 steps and the Al-Anon logo. Because the AA logo is a circle with a triangle in the middle of it, and as I understand it, the Al-Anon logo is a triangle with a circle inside of it. So here's the question now that I want to have you reflect on. In the beginning of the discussion, I asked you to ask yourself, what is it that you believe? And you wrote something down, and you honestly believed that you believed that. But now I'm going to ask you, as I was asked at 10 years of sobriety, how do I behave in light of what I believe I believe? How do I behave?
To obtain additional copies, receive a free catalog of AA and Al-Anon talks, or to find out about our tape and CD of the Month Club, call Encore Audio Archives at 1-800-878-1308 or visit our website at www.12steptapes.com.
Write down an answer to that once you give it a little reflection. Do you see any incongruence, any dissonance between the way I behave and the way I believe? And I discovered my own agnosticism. A doubter. That's all. Not a theoretical doubter, but a practical doubter. I acted as if I was the power and that I was totally self-reliant. And I found that my concept of God, 10 years of sobriety, 2 major spiritual awakenings previously doing the work, I found that my concept of God was the very impediment to an authentic relationship with the mystery. An authentic relationship with the mystery. That's why that set-aside prayer was so powerful, was so effective. I was willing to have the Spirit enter, whatever that means, my being, and open me up to a process that allowed me to see that my concept prevented me from having a real relationship. And I was able to be released from it. Hear the vocabulary. I was able to be released from it. Now, Bill talks about the Father of light who presides over us all. That's a transcendent concept. The circle including the triangle. As human beings, that triangle is represented with the circle encompassing us. But then, of course, Bill suggests on page 55 an answer to the question, where and how do we find God, that was posed on 45. Bill's really good with the questions. He answers it on 55. deep down inside of us. Search diligently, search fearlessly, think honestly. Appealing to the two things that make us specifically human, knowing and deciding, willing. The Al-Anon symbol represents immanence. These are $100 words that capture at least some perspective of this reality. Bill says God is or God isn't, God is everything or God is nothing. Thomas Merton said, if there is this reality, capital R, if there is this reality, it has no circumference, transcendence. And its center is everywhere, immanence. Spirit everywhere. If you didn't see that, I want you to see it. The person who puts my slides together, oh, that's not too good. The color's not coming out. All right? So look at the bottom of the slide here. That's cool. I like mechanical stuff like that. Whoops, don't fall off your feet, Herb. All right. So Bill's very clear in the big book that we came to believe. My experience is it's a process. For me, in the rooms of the 12-step, it was a process that began, of course, in 1984, but it didn't reach a peak in me until 1994, 10 years later, doing this process of the steps 3 different times with 3 different people. The mystics, so in step 3, oops, here we go. So step 3 talks about a decision for power. Step 2 is a decision about power. We're still addressing the question, is God necessary? Taking you through some of the developmental stuff that you've experienced in coming to whatever relationship it is you have with the mystery, with God, with higher power. Step 3 is a decision for a relationship with this power. And Bill calls that an act of trust, the keystone. It means we behave, we say the prayer, and we do steps 4 through 9. The mystics talk about this reality with a capital R. In between God and me, there is no between. These are meditations. God is closer to me than I am to myself. God is everything or nothing. God is transcendent and immanent. And none of that represents what God really is. But it's helping us get some kind of an approximate awareness of the dynamic of this reality. God is closer to me than my very breath. The Greek word spiros is breath, spirit, the breath of God. And a most recent mystic, Peace Pilgrim, says there is nowhere that there is not God. These are people's experience, not necessarily my experience, but I'm just relating to see the poetry of this, not the logic and not the theology, the wonderful poetry that might bring us into a question. Pretty words, what's the reality? Jung talked about that alcoholics are particularly uniquely spiritual, and they are thirsting deeply, existentially thirsting for the Spirit with a capital S, and they get distracted by spirits with a small s. And at the bottom of the letter to Bill Wilson, in which he basically wrote that, he had a Latin phrase, spiritus contra spiritum. The Spirit with a capital S is the antidote to spirits with a small s. See, that Bill calls Carl Jung the spiritual father of Alcoholics Anonymous, because he's the first one who said to an alcoholic, Roland Hazard, go find a spiritual experience. And Roland said, good, I'll go back to church. He said, young man, you're not listening. I didn't say church or religion. I said a spiritual experience. And Roland went back and found the Oxford group with their 6 steps and had a profound conversion experience. As the result of that, reached out to Ebby Ebby had the experience. He reached out to Bill. Bill had the experience. Bill reached out to Bob. Bob had the experience. Now, the interesting thing for me is that Bob was already in, Bob Smith, co-founder, was already in the Oxford group 2.5 years. He met weekly, read the Bible, prayed, talked, went home weekly and got drunk. Because he didn't know what the problem was. He's living in the solution for 2.5 years, but he didn't know what the problem was. Bill comes and explains Dr. Silkworth's opinion that you have an allergy and an obsession. Dr. Bob, a scientist, got it. And then applied the principles of the Oxford group with a whole new vigor. That it was powerless over it. It wasn't about knowledge, and it wasn't about willpower, and it wasn't about morality. It was about action. And so, take a look at this reality then. If flowers drop seeds to create more flowers, and cats procreate and have kittens, and humans procreate and have babies, if there is this reality of divine creation, then perhaps we're the image and likeness. Isn't that what the poet who wrote Genesis said? This is the first book in the Hebrew Scripture, Genesis. Humans were made in the image of God, image and likeness of God. Humans were made in the image and likeness of God. And the phrase goes on, God made them male and female. Worthy of a meditation. Image and likeness. What does that mean? We'll explore it in a minute. But you see, I have to come at it with some logic here. If I am, how did I get here originally? If the world is, how did it get here originally? If in fact I was created by infinite to become finite, but there's a chip off the old block in me, huh? Maybe. You've heard it, the spark of the divine. So, one of the mental images and questions that I heard a story, it's like two little fish in the ocean, and they're just frolicking, having a wonderful time. They're young. And a big fish comes by and looks at the two little fish and smiles because they're really having a good time. And this is one of those wise old fishes. And the wise old fish says, "Water's warm, isn't it?" And swims off. And the two little fish look at each other and they go, "What's water?" Well, no, think about it. Water is their entire environment. And without it, they could not survive. But they don't know that they're in water. Are we a fish in water? Are we humans in the milieu of the source? That transcendence and immanence concept. The reason I don't like it, I liked it originally, and as I meditated on it and thought a little bit more about it, it's a dualism. It's God and me. Whereas a new metaphor came to me. Am I more like a wave in the ocean? A wave having a distinct, unique characteristic. The wave is not the ocean. The wave is the wave. It has come out of and will recede back to and has a moment of individual, unique existence. It is not the ocean, but it is not the ocean. I'm very clear from my fourth step, I am not God. But I'm very clear from my meditation and reviewing these kinds of things that I am not God. I'm a spark of the divine. I have a core of goodness. And I've become quite conscious looking at the different levels of consciousness. And through the fourth step, I saw the false self, that fabricated self, that mask, that persona, that Hollywood storefront that I created from my family of origin and my early childhood and educational experiences. I created as a protection of me. And I didn't know it wasn't me. I really thought that mask, that persona was me. Persona is the word the Greeks used for the mask that was used in drama and theater to represent the characters. We create our person. We create the image of who we are. And most of us believe it until suffering brings us to a point where we examine who we think we are and we find out that we're not who we are. We don't know what our true self is until we, in fact, do some real spiritual work, some real psychological work, and we have that false self, that mask dismantled, disintegrated. And perhaps we come to a point where we say, we really are in the image and likeness of the Creator. We are really at least image and likeness, meaning I have the ability to know and the ability to think and free will. Whether I connect that to Creator, divine source, or any type of authentic spirituality. But that gives me the sense of my core of goodness. That's a phrase from Thomas Keating. He's a Trappist monk in Snowmass, one of my teachers. But he uses that word, the core of goodness. What you believe about yourself will determine how you treat yourself. What you believe about yourself will determine your behavior. How you behave will determine your life. Perhaps at our core there is a divine presence. Bill says so on page 55. In the final analysis, that's the only place this reality with a capital R can be found. You see, and we've done some work identifying what our story is, what my particular story is. I love the Russian dolls, you know, that you take them apart and you see the different sizes, right? Remember Maslow's hierarchy of values? And we get down to the final true me, which is a lot smaller than what I thought from the beginning, right? Yeah, embarrassing, humiliating, and therefore given me some humility. St. Teresa of Avila says humility is truth. It's a sense of perspective, right sizing, all right? And through the process of the steps, we determine our story, the human story. Some of us have a very negative attitude, and some of us have some of a positive attitude, and most of us develop more positivity as we, in fact, do the work of steps 4 through 9 and are transformed. We transform our suffering to healing. We transform victimhood to responsibility. We transform powerlessness to power. We transform the false self to the true self. We come from a place of no meaning and suffering as a result to true meaning of who we are in ourselves and in our community and in the world. We come from darkness to light. We unmask the true self. So is God necessary? Well, do you mean the reality of God with a capital R and a capital G? That whatever it is that we're symbolizing by the word G-O-D? Or are we saying my belief? What is necessary? The reality or my belief in the reality? They're very different from my experience. Now, what is the story? As I mentioned, we've looked at my story, we've looked at our story, the human race, and now what is the story, the absolute meaning of it all? Well, we made a decision about that in step 2, and we made a decision for that in step 3. And we've come to some grips with our core of goodness by doing steps 4 through 9 and seeing that, yeah, we've made mistakes, but we are not a mistake. That in fact there is something very authentic deep down inside of us that we can in fact foster and enlarge. Because if there is no God, or if there is God, does it really matter? Ask yourself, does it really matter? If in fact we're looking at this reality, if there is no God, or if there is God, what we need as human beings is we need to listen. We need to listen to that voice inside of us. I don't know what it is. I know it is. I know it is. When I get quiet enough, when I get open enough, I don't know whether it's my higher self. I don't know whether it's the Holy Spirit. I have no idea what it is, but I know that it is, and it guides me. It doesn't matter what I call it. I need to give thanks to have an open heart. God doesn't need our obedience. By the way, the Latin word obedience, obedere, means to listen. Pretty interesting from my standpoint. I'm a word guy. I love that. God doesn't need our prayer. God is totally self-sufficient, infinite. So why do we pray? We need to pray. At the very least, it's a positive affirmation, giving us sort of direction. At the very most, it might have, and this sounds a little new agey, it might have an energy that flows out to the human spirit that has some impact and effect. I actually believe that. I think there's been some research that validates that. The power of prayer is not to change God. God can't change. Hello? If God could change, God's not God. By at least my approach to it. God doesn't need our meditation. But I do. I need guidance. I sit in the presence of whatever it is, this energy in me, this consciousness in me, every morning asking for guidance. And I get it. And I look back over my shoulder and I look, and Richard Rohr says that the path in front of us looks labyrinthian. But when I look back over my shoulder, the path straightens out. God doesn't need our love. God is unconditional and infinite and self-contained. But we need to love, because that's our human condition. Connectedness. It's really interesting. Some scientists found a community in the United States that were living between 100 and 110 years old, and regularly. And so they went to study it to see if it was the water or the food they ate or the culture they had or their DNA. And they looked at everything. And you know what they found out? Statistically valid research. It was connectedness in the community that gave them a sense of security and love and comfort and a sense of that fellowship that we get in the 12-step rooms. God doesn't need our suggestions. God is all-knowing. But we, with our free will, need to make decisions and to take actions. God doesn't need our good works, of course. And you know, it's very countercultural and very counter-traditional religion, some of what I'm talking about. And I'm not saying it's black and white, and I'm not even saying it's true. It's certainly my observation and my experience. But we need to take action. The man who took me through the steps said, willingness without action is fantasy. He was using that against me, of course, because I said, I was willing to make my 9th step, but I just didn't have time. And he said, willingness without action is fantasy. Thank you very much. Right. All right. And so, we have to ask ourselves, and you've heard the phrase, are we human beings attempting to have a spiritual experience? Or are we spiritual beings trying to have a human experience? And the answer is yes, of course. Both are true. I would invite you to pray the 3rd step prayer in just a minute. I'm going to read the promises of the 3rd step from the Big Book, page 63. There's promises in every step. When we sincerely took such a position, all sorts of remarkable things followed. We had a new relationship with power. I'm paraphrasing some of the words. God provides what we needed if we kept close to God and performed God's work well. Established on such a footing, we became less and less interested in ourselves. More and more we became interested in seeing what we could contribute to life. As we felt new power flow in, as we enjoyed peace of mind, as we discovered we could face life successfully, as we became conscious of God's presence, we began to lose our fear of today, tomorrow, or the hereafter. We are reborn, given a new life. I call the 3rd step prayer the prayer of consent. There is in my view of reality, there is an unconditional, unilateral flow of love. I come from that source, I live in that source, and I return in full union to that source. That's my approach to spirituality. And what my role is with my free will is to consent to the truth of that and then take the actions based on that. The 3rd step is an ideal model of a prayer of consent. Please join me. God, I offer myself to you to build with me and to do with me as you wish. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do your will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of your power, your love, and your way of life. May I do your will always. So we came to believe a process of making a choice, a process of taking some action. And Bill has an article in 1958 called The New Frontier, Emotional Sobriety. And in it, he talks about the healing... Oops, hello. Did it go off? It's on now. He talks about the healing circuit. It's just a couple sentences, but it was so dense that I took it into meditation for several weeks, actually, and allowed it to percolate in me. And then I wrote a meditation on the healing circuit, which is back there on the table also for your use if you want to take it. But essentially what it says is that I have come in step 2 to believe that I am in constant contact. And in step 3, I make my first conscious contact. And that I am created and therefore I am loved. And as a result of finishing the steps, I've been brought organically to a place where I really do want to help other people. I want to reduce the suffering by introducing them to authentic spirituality. Of course, I studied to be a missionary priest for 7 years. And I saw that that wasn't my calling, ordination. But as the result of the 12 steps and the conversion process, I've been actually brought full circle so that now I really have dedicated my entire life to helping other people on the spiritual path. Broadly spiritual path. The substructure, the understructure certainly is the 12 steps. But I have become a loving man. And when other people are loved, they see that they're lovable. This is the healing circuit. It's just good psychology, let alone good theology. And when others feel lovable, they also can be loving. And isn't that what Bill asks us to do? Carry the message based on principles and help other people. This is a human development. I read Melody Beattie's book on Codependent No More in preparation for that last talk on Where Was God When All This Was Happening? And she confirmed the human development that we've experienced in the program, that first we have addiction, and we're in full dependence. Then we get out of addiction based on a 12-step methodology and some mystery that gives us freedom, and we become independent. And then as a result of carrying on with meditation and acts of altruism, we become interdependent, and then she introduced a new word. I've never seen it before. I just read it last year. A new word. We become undependent. Free. Autonomous. Not attached. Not attached to ourselves. Not attached to other people. Completely undependent. Not undependable. So it's a wonderful process. Is God necessary? I don't know. But I did pray the 7-step prayer to be recreated, and I was recreated. Isn't it interesting that the 7-step prayer comes after the 6th step, where we acknowledge that we have character defects over which we're powerless? And as my step guide said, you may be powerless over your character defects, but you're 100% responsible for how they manifest in your behavior. So you pray because you're powerless, and you call me every day so that you're accountable. Oh, it's the formula for transformation at its simplest level. At its simplest level. I don't find it any accident, and I hope Bill was as conscious as I am now of the way this prayer starts out. If I need to be recreated, the prayer begins, my Creator. Please join me in a prayer of healing. My Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character that stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. So who's coming to save us? Right. Who's coming to save us? We have a culture that says, and a history that says, that there's a white knight, that there's a fairy princess, that the Calvary is coming, the good guys win. We hate movies where the bad guy wins, unless we've identified with them. So God's not coming. If there is no God, of course God's not coming. But if there is God, God's not coming. God's already here, fully present. The absence of God is a delusion. God either is or God isn't. God is everything or God is nothing. And it's not about knowing and certitude, and it's not about feeling. It's that act of faith of the second step. An empty decision that has no substance. A dark, thin decision of my will. God is. But the key is then I act as if it's true. So what is it? This, what we're looking for. It could just be the 12 steps. Bill said that in the 12 and 12, doesn't he, in step 2? He said maybe it's the group. Try that. If you have any resistance to fancy words or anything that connotes religion, try connecting to the group. Clearly, this is a team of people that have something that you don't have. You may not know what they have, therefore you may not know that you want what they have, but you certainly know when you first come in, you don't want what you got. And so anything might be a benefit. Maybe as the Buddhists say, because Buddhism is not a religion as I understand it. I'm a dilettante in the area of studying Buddhism, but my understanding is it's not a religion. They call it a way of life. And they, through their mindfulness practice, try to connect to their higher self. I really like that. I find that Buddhism is the best parallel in terms of the 12-step spirituality because it doesn't have any dogma and it does suggest a way of living. Mindfulness and compassion. Very akin to our 11-step and 12-step. Is it the human spirit? That's what Carl Jung said, the collective unconscious, that there is a connection of human beings, dead and alive, that has a commonality of a spirit, of a connection of the spirit. Could that be true? My story, our story. Or is it the story? That in fact, all along, spirituality with a capital S is in fact the truth, the Holy Spirit. So rather than HP, higher power, I'm going to be using from now on in this conversation, HS. Because it could be healthy steps, it could be higher self, it could be human spirit, it could be Holy Spirit. I don't know what's going on, but I know when I look over my shoulder, something's going on. Is God necessary? The reality? I don't know. Is my belief necessary? Actually, I didn't believe in the truest sense in God when I had my first and second spiritual awakenings, 1988 and 1991. I went through the steps with different people. I had different experiences of transformation, but no new experience with steps 2 and 3 because I was still attached to my religious tradition. I had not been given the set-aside prayer, and I had not found freedom from my concepts. So without any type of authentic relationship with or understanding of or true belief in a practical sense, I had a spiritual awakening. Was God necessary? Was my belief in God necessary? My action was. I did the drill. I did the methodology. And the results were transformation. The results were being brought to a new level of consciousness, and like pouring sulfuric acid over the false self persona, it disintegrated over time, and the real self, little Herbie, emerged. The true self. I've never done that. I'm afraid of what has just happened. And so look at us. We come up to the 4th step because we're in jail. We're asleep, dreaming that we're awake. And the solution is to wake up. We're asleep, dreaming that we're awake. Most human beings. Gurdjieff is a philosopher from early 20th century that said that. And we need to wake up, and I've talked about it before. Our culture says we need to know something, feel good about it, and then we'll do it. But spirituality, the 12-step spirituality and the experience in the room says we need to do something. Then we'll know, and then we'll feel. And that's been validated recently at the UCLA research by Dan Siegel. It changes organically our brain. Organically, biologically, we change our brain when we behave differently. Not quickly, they called it habit, of course. But what is habit is we're literally growing new connections in the brain. And so rather than being in jail, all right? Are you getting it? Who's holding the bars? Not the wall. Not the wall, not the unit. I'm holding the bars in front of my face, looking through it as if I'm in jail and I'm prisoner of my own bondage of self, Bill says. Yeah? So we need to release the bars, right? I am the one. All right? I am the one. I am waiting for. I am the one I am waiting for. I need to show up. But I didn't know who I was. And I thought I was a Renaissance man. I mean, graduate education in philosophy, psychology, and theology. And now sober in AA and having a spiritual awakening. I thought I was a Renaissance man. And when I did the real work of the 12 steps, especially 4 through 9, I found that rather than a Renaissance man, I'm a Neanderthal. Embarrassing. It was really, I was embarrassed in my own presence. And I heard somebody say the other day, I was introduced to myself for the very first time. I was introduced to my true self for the very first time. Through Alcoholics Anonymous, I found autonomy, meaning my individuation, my true self. Alan Berger, clinical psychologist I co-facilitate some retreats and workshops with, he says, we hold the center of gravity inside of ourselves. Wow. Beautiful. As long as my center of gravity is in Lulu, all right, you can't even imagine what my life will be like. But if my center of gravity is within myself, Lulu can do her dance, whatever she does, and I'll observe it, maybe be entertained by it for a while until it becomes a source of suffering, and then I stop. Then I stop. I walk away because I've had my center of gravity inside of myself. Oh, there it is. And as the result of early introduction in Alcoholics Anonymous, my sponsor said, come early to meetings and stay afterwards and help out. And I didn't want to do that. I'm a busy guy, don't you know? But I did it for some reason. Grace and willingness met. And I began to be part then of the fellowship, part of that community. I didn't know that would be how it would work. And I felt connected. And as I did the step work, of course, then I began to want to help other people understand and experience that step work so that they also can find the freedom that they're craving, the freedom that will give them the life that flourishes. That's the word I use for my life. 27 years, my life has flourished. It's not without its problems. I'm a human being and I make mistakes. But I know that as a human being, I can correct those mistakes. I can take different actions. I can get resources. I can whatever. And so I have a practice of intentional consciousness based on step 11. That's what I call it. It's a meditation practice. It's a prayer and meditation practice. I learned really to pray in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. The set-aside prayer, certainly, the third step and seven-step prayer. Powerful, powerful, powerful intentions. The words are not important. The spirit is important. And then I learned how to meditate. And the man who taught me meditation, he unpacked the big book's description of what meditation is. Directed thinking. We ask God to direct our thinking, then we begin thinking. And he said, and listen to your thinking as an answer to your prayer. God, direct my thinking. Therefore, I'm going to think and watch and listen to my thinking as a direct transmission from the source. Later on, I went to a man who's not in a 12-step program, but deeply spiritual, and he helped me even further. He said, Herb, he said, think this thought. This changed my meditation practice and gave me a connection to it that was consistent. He said, think this thought. You're as powerless over your spirituality as you are over alcohol, having no power at all. Think this thought. You're as powerless over your meditation as you are over alcohol, having no power at all. Sit in the presence of the power, humbled by your powerlessness, realizing that the effort is your responsibility and the results are none of your business. There's only two mistakes that you can make in meditation or a consciousness practice. There's only two mistakes. One, don't show up. Two, leave early. Everything in between is none of your business. But, he said, if you really want to know whether your meditation practice is effective over a period of time, ask your wife how you're treating her. Because you will change. You will be changed. Hear it. Hear it. Appendix 2 of the big book. You will be changed with a consistency in that practice. And so the practice is the turning. And so I like to do this gesture. You need to look up now. Follow the bouncing herb. If the nature of the problem, the spiritual malady, is the bedevilments, and Bill Wilson says selfishness, self-centeredness is the root. Selfishness, self-centeredness. I take care of me. I see only me. I am motivated only by my happiness. I make a decision in step 3 to turn, and I begin to turn through steps 4 through 9 to a relationship with higher power, 11, and a service to the community, 12. I make a decision to turn in step 3. I do some work to witness to that decision of turning, and I realize I have been turned. And I enter the world of the Spirit, which he says we commenced our way of living as we cleaned up the past. We do inventory, 10 step, spot check inventory. And we do meditation in the morning and in the evening. And we do service on a 24/7 basis based on spiritual principles. We improve our consciousness with meditation. We enlarge our consciousness through altruistic acts. This is spiritual sobriety. What are the principles? Think about this. It's not esoteric stuff. It's not mysterious stuff. Think about gravity. No matter what you want, no matter what you know, no matter how good a person you are, if you jump off a 30-story building, you're going to die. Because the law of gravity has no investment in what you know or think or feel or want, or how good a person you are. It's a law of gravity. Perhaps universal laws, human principles, we call them spiritual principles. Perhaps They're every bit as non-negotiable as the law of gravity. Perhaps, and Bill says, we practice these principles in all our affairs. What principles are those? Honesty, faith and hope, trust, courage. I've come up with a list, wordsmithing it from other people's lists, because Bill didn't give us a list of principles to practice, but he gave us lots of examples, especially chapters 7 through 11 in the book. Following step 11, he talks about practicing these principles and carrying the message. Chapters 7 through 11 are his experience with that carrying that message and practicing those principles. Step 5, integrity. Step 6, willingness. Step 7, humility. Step 8, compassion. Step 9, justice. Step 10, discipline. Step 11, awareness. Step 12, service. And you can see the actions that are indicated. I have a handout back there. You don't need to write it all down. There's a handout there that has the bedevilments on one side connected to the promises, and then it has the principles on the other side like this. And so you're welcome to take as many of whatever is there in terms of the handouts as you want. On the other table are books and flyers and things. The books you need to pay for, please. And so we're talking about consciousness, which is a practice. I am responsible for the effort, not the results. If we could really get that as task-oriented people in a culture of narcissism, I mean, that's what we have here in North America. Oh my God, it's hard for you to survive in any type of integrated psychological, let alone an integrated spiritual basis, because we have all this advertising that understands about conditioning, and they have conditioned us to what happiness is. You know, boats and jobs and money and arm candy, whether it be male or female, right? A journey is, but it's not a destination. This is a journey, not a destination. All right? The destination is the journey. Think about that. I just reversed it. The destination for the human being is to embark on the journey of being awake. Freud said it. The purpose of human beings is to come from unconsciousness to consciousness. Otherwise, we'll conclude that we are a victim of fate and the malevolence of other people's ill will. We need to come from unconsciousness to consciousness. That's what Bill Wilson said. We need to wake up. Harry Tebow, the psychiatrist that worked with Bill, said Bill was right. He got it right. The first 9 steps are for the destruction of the ego, for the deflation of the ego at depth. Bill got it right. But he said, unfortunately, the ego has an uncanny way of regenerating itself. And that's why Bill got that right. Step 10, spot check inventory. When we're disturbed, it says in the 12 and 12, it's a spiritual axiom. When I am disturbed, there is something wrong with me. I hate that. And yet, when I believed that, I was a victim of you. And once I took full responsibility for it, I can choose not to be a victim any longer. I can be released from the bondage of self. I take full responsibility for my life and my actions and the consequences of those actions. And Maslow said it in his hierarchy of values when we got up to the top of the pyramid. He says that's self-actualization, the realization, making real I, making real me, coming to grips with what is the true human being, a definition of the context. What's the story? What is the context I'm living in? What is the meaning of it? What is the purpose of it? And what is the value of life and my actions? These are the terms that have been given a lot of personal application and experience to me. I have identified that God is love, and that everything that was created, especially humans, are then loving. And to the extent that we operate as loving, we're connected and in alignment with our true nature. And what does that mean? And that's the question that you need to ask yourself, and it'll have different answers for different people. Our invitation is as unique as our fingerprint. There never has been a fingerprint like yours. There never will be a fingerprint like yours. Your fingerprint is unique. Your invitation is that unique. The challenge to our life is to figure out what is the invitation. In meditation, I got a phrase. I'm a word guy. The inclination is the invitation. That's really powerful. The inclination is the invitation. I misread it becoming a monk, the inclination to have a spiritual life. I misread it. But as a result of alcohol problem and Alcoholics Anonymous, the solution, I've been able to solve that problem and respond now to the invitation. In my book, I say, my answer is yes. My response is thanks. So a spiritual awakening is that turning. And again, this illustration is in the handouts, the turning from the disease to harmony. And you can see, I won't read them all, but we turn from the addiction, we turn from anger and fear and inappropriate behavior, especially sex, dishonesty, secrets, guilt and shame. The difference, guilt is a negative feeling for what I have done. Shame is a negative feeling about who I am. There is healthy guilt and shame. If you're a bank robber, you're guilty of robbing banks. All right? But then most of us have acquired some family of origin or social or cultural guilt and shame that is just not appropriate. And we need to be released from that because it creates our suffering and it drives us like puppets on a string, and we don't know that there's strings. And we do what we don't want to do, and we don't do what we want to do, those bedevilments. So although I use the term my will and God's will, I'm really talking about being in harmony with the true reality, which we need to figure out. What is the true reality? And we need to practice. My spiritual director, the one who told me about meditation, he says all people on a spiritual path have a spiritual practice. And they practice their practice. And when they practice, and they're faithful to their practice, and when they're faithful to their practice is faithful to them. It's very powerful. It's about having a practice and practicing, knowing that you'll do better tomorrow. And tomorrow comes and you'll do better tomorrow. And it's not about judging ourselves. It's about knowing that I'm doing the best I can while knowing I'm not doing the best I can. That's that spirituality of imperfection that Ernie Kirst wrote a book about. So we practice presence in inventory. We practice prayer meditation in step 11, and we practice principles in our altruistic service to others. And this is our way of living. I was at a meeting where a trustee of AA read something, and it just, I had never, even though I had done a workshop on the concepts, I had never seen this information. I'm going to flash it up here as I'm going to read it. We're coming close, but I'm not going to end at 11 o'clock. I'm going to end when I end, and it'll be about 5 or 10 minutes. Freedom under God to grow in God's likeness and image will ever be the quest of Alcoholics Anonymous. We believe that our freedom to serve is truly the freedom by which we live. the freedom in which we have our being. The 12 concepts. It's the final page on the service manual, if you're interested. It really was a powerful support of my reflections and discernment here in talking about image and likeness. And so here we are. Is God necessary? Was the opening question. Grace and willingness. I took it into a meditation about grace and willingness. Which comes first, the chicken or the egg? Well, the egg, so the chicken. No, the chicken, so the egg. Oh, shoot. I couldn't answer it. What comes first, grace or willingness? Well, grace gives you the willingness, but how come you received the grace? Well, I was and I'm going into a circle that I cannot break and understand. And I took it into meditation, and the meditation voice said to me, you were taken to a place of willingness. Hear the grace of that. You were taken to a place of willingness. But you were willing to be taken. Hear my role, my responsibility. Did it answer the question? No, but it gave me poetic satisfaction. Well, and I call it a mystery. It's okay to live in mystery, but not vaguely confused by it. In awe of the mystery, and then take the actions that you discern from it. Is God necessary? Well, you ask, are you a fish in water? That dualistic concept. What is your belief? Or are you a wave in the ocean? What is your belief? Non-dualism. I am not God, but I am not God. And I come from light, and I live in light, and I have light as a lantern, and I stand by the path to light the path for others so that they can walk the path of light and have their own experience. I share the light of my experience on the path that I walked so that others can have the experience of walking the path in that light, but have their own experience. One meditation. It's my favorite. It comes from a Chinese literature. It's a Chinese legend. I heard it in a retreat 20 years ago, and I adopted it to be used in perhaps a situation like this. Think in terms of the process of ego deflation through the methodology of the 12 steps and coming out the other side transformed. Once upon a time, in the heart of the Western Kingdom lay a beautiful garden, and there in the cool of the day was the master of the garden wont to walk. Of all the denizens of the garden, the most beautiful and the most beloved was a gracious and noble bamboo. Year after year, bamboo grew yet more noble and gracious, conscious of his master's love and watchful delight, but modest and gentle withal. And often, when wind came to revel in the garden, bamboo would cast aside his grave stateliness to dance and play right merrily, tossing and swaying and leaping and bowing in joyous abandon, leading the great dance of the garden, which most delighted the master's heart. Now upon a day, the master himself drew near to contemplate his bamboo with eyes of curious expectancy, and bamboo, in a passion of adoration, bowed his great head to the ground in loving greeting. The master spoke, "Bamboo, bamboo, I would use thee." Bamboo flung his head to the sky in utter delight. The day of days had come, the day for which he had been made, the day for which he had been growing hour by hour, the day in which he would find his completion and his destiny. His voice came low, "Master, I am ready. Use me as thou wilt." Bamboo, the master's voice was grave. I would fain take thee and cut thee down. A trembling of a great horror shook Bamboo. Cut me down? Me, whom thou, master, hast made the most beautiful in all thy garden, to cut me down? Ah, not that, not that. Use me for thy joy, O master, but cut me not down. Beloved Bamboo, the master's voice grew graver still, if I cut thee not down, I cannot use thee. The garden grew still. Wind held his breath. Bamboo slowly bent his proud and glorious head. There came a whisper, Master, if thou canst not use me, but thou cut me down, then do thy will and cut. Bamboo, beloved Bamboo, I would cut thy leaves and branches from thee also. Master, master, spare me, cut me down, and lay my beauty in the dust. But wouldst thou take from me my leaves and branches also? Bamboo, alas, if I cut them not away, I cannot use thee. The sun hid his face. A listening butterfly glided fearfully away, and Bamboo shivered in terrible expectancy, whispering low, Master, cut away. Bamboo, Bamboo, I would yet cleave thee in twain and cut out thine heart, for if I cut not so, I cannot use thee. Then was Bamboo bowed to the ground. Master, master, then cut and cleave. So did the master of the garden take Bamboo and cut him down, and hack off his branches, and strip off his leaves, and cleave him in twain, and cut out his heart. And lifting him gently, carried him to where was a spring of fresh sparkling water in the midst of his dry fields. Then putting one end of broken bamboo in the spring, and the other end into the water channel in his field, the master laid down gently his beloved bamboo, and the spring sang welcome, and the clear sparkling waters raced joyously down the channel of Bamboo's torn body into the waiting fields. Then the rice was planted, and the days went by, and the shoots grew, and the harvest came. In that day was Bamboo, once so glorious in his stately beauty, yet more glorious in his brokenness and humility. For in his beauty he was life abundant, but in his brokenness he became a channel of abundant life to his master's world. I would like you to join me in the prayer of transformation, the prayer of St. Francis, who talks about becoming a channel, who talks about the turning from selfishness to other-centeredness, the turning that is a process, the turning that is a promise. Lord, make me a channel of thy peace, that where there is hatred I may bring love, that where there is wrong I may bring the spirit of forgiveness, that where there is discord I may bring harmony, that where there is error I may bring truth, that where there is doubt I may bring faith, that where there is despair I may bring hope, that where there are shadows I may bring light, that where there is sadness I may bring joy. Lord, grant that I may seek rather to comfort than to be comforted, to understand than to be understood, to love than to be loved. For it is by self-forgetting that one finds, it is by forgiving that one is forgiven, it is by dying that one awakens to eternal life. Is God necessary? I don't know. But I am necessary. I am necessary to figure out what the truth is, my truth, and then take action based on that truth. I am a channel of light. I am a lantern. And I feel totally in alignment with my purpose and with my meaning. Thank you. I'll hang around if anybody wants to chat with me or have questions. And don't forget, there's flyers and there's information and handouts and there's books on the table for sale. Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think. Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right, but I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.